that's a threat, by the way. That's the threat to William. That's the threat to Charles. That's the threat to Catherine. That's the threat to the British royal family. But wake up, Prince Harry, because that's the threat to you too. Okay? She has been taking notes methodically about your marriage for years.
There is a weapon being built, right now, quietly, methodically, in the hills of Montecito, California. In the small hours of the morning while the rest of the world sleeps, Meghan Markle is recording voice notes on her iPhone, journals filled with structured reflections, a meticulous, years-long archive of everything that has happened inside one of the most scrutinized marriages on earth. And the question that royal watchers, palace insiders, and now even the mainstream press are finally asking out loud is not whether this material exists. It is what on earth she plans to do with it. Because here is the thing. If Meghan Markle releases an autobiography, and the evidence is now overwhelming that she will, it will not simply be a book, it will be a detonation. A multi-platform, multi-million-pound event designed to reshape the narrative around the Sussex story, to reframe her time inside the British royal family, and if the people closest to her are to be believed to do lasting damage to an institution that has stood for centuries. And the palace knows it. William knows it. And if Prince Harry has any sense left at all, he should be deeply, deeply afraid of what his wife has been building, because the notes she has been taking are not just about the royal family, they are about him. This story breaks open today because a major piece of journalism, extraordinary in its detail, and frankly staggering in what it inadvertently reveals, has confirmed what royal commentators and insiders have been warning about for years. Meghan Markle's autobiography is not a rumour. It is not a vague future possibility dangled to keep her name in the conversation. It is an active, fully formed, strategically managed project. And behind it stands a network of some of the most powerful women in American entertainment and media, women who, the article would have you believe, are there out of loyalty and sisterhood. But royal insiders are not buying it for a single second. There is money involved. There is leverage involved. And there is, at the very heart of all of it, Oprah Winfrey. Prince William has been watching this situation develop for some time, and what has emerged from those closest to him is that the Prince of Wales is acutely aware of what is coming, and that he is not prepared to simply wait for the bomb to go off. This is a man who has been quietly, deliberately building the future of the monarchy brick by brick. A man who does not act impulsively, but when he does act, he acts with precision and purpose. And the intelligence reaching him about Meghan's secret project has hardened his position considerably. What we are seeing, in real time, is a woman assembling the most dangerous weapon she has ever held, and a future king calculating exactly what must be done about it. That is where we begin today. And by the time we are done, you will understand just how serious this situation has become. To understand why this moment matters so much, you have to understand where we are in the Sussex story right now. Because the public narrative, the one being carefully cultivated by Meghan's team and eagerly amplified by certain corners of the American media, is one of quiet reinvention, a woman finding her footing, a brand slowly rebuilding. She has had her lifestyle content on Netflix, her as-ever product range, her American Riviera orchard endeavors, a renewed presence at events and on social media. The suggestion, from those sympathetic to her, is that Meghan Markle is getting on with things, moving forward, rising above it all. And the implication is that anyone still paying attention to the drama of the Sussex departure is simply clinging to old grievances. But here is what is really happening beneath the surface. The Hollywood doors that briefly seemed open to her are, by most credible accounts, firmly shut. Her Netflix content underperformed in ways that could not be hidden, and that no amount of positive framing could disguise. The as-ever launch, despite considerable fanfare and a great deal of carefully managed anticipation, did not deliver the cultural moment she needed. The Met Gala invitation that many expected never materialized, and the absence was noticed and discussed and significant. The A-list dinner tables she once hoped to anchor remain conspicuously out of reach. The brand partnerships that would signal genuine commercial traction have not come. And so the question facing Meghan Markle is the same question it has been for several years now. How does she generate the income, the relevance, and the narrative control she desperately needs? How does a woman who walked away from one of the most extraordinary platforms in the world, rebuild something that comes even close to replacing it? The answer, it turns out, has been sitting on her iPhone all along, an autobiography, but not just any autobiography. Royal watchers who have followed this story closely have long suspected that Meghan was holding this card, that beneath the surface of every failed business venture, every strategic appearance, every carefully staged moment, there was always a nuclear option being kept in reserve. A project so potentially explosive that its very existence gives her leverage she could not obtain any other way. What we now know is that she has not merely been contemplating writing it. She has been actively constructing it for years, brick by brick, page by page, voice note by voice note. And the architecture of the project, the network of women surrounding her, the conversations happening behind closed doors at Netflix, the involvement of the most powerful media mogul in the world, tells you everything you need to know about the scale and ambition of what is coming.
Harry doesn't seem to understand that his life is going to be forever changed once he decides to do what he wants to do. And I know that is to no longer stay in California and to have his life back. And the minute he takes that step, that's when the threat, that's when the risk to his own life and that of his own family, the reputation becomes at stake, because that's exactly what's going to happen. Meghan has been documenting for years everything.
So how did this all come to light? The source of this week's revelations is, in itself, a story within a story, and one that says a great deal about how the Sussex communications operation works and what it is trying to achieve right now. A detailed piece appeared in a major British newspaper, one that was clearly briefed by Harry and Meghan themselves or by those very close to them. The piece was crafted with a specific purpose: to rehabilitate Meghan's image among a particular audience, to suggest that the narrative of her Hollywood isolation was false, and to reframe the Sussex story in the most flattering possible terms. It was, in short, a piece of strategic image management masquerading as journalism. And yet, and this is the extraordinary thing, buried within this carefully constructed puff piece was a confirmation that royal commentators and palace sources have been waiting years to receive. Meghan Markle has been taking notes. Voice notes on her phone in the early hours of the morning, written journals, structured reflections, methodical documentation of everything, and crucially, not just since Megxit, since before it. She has been recording her life inside the royal family, her marriage, her experiences, her grievances, cataloguing them with the precision of someone who always planned to use them, not as private processing, not as a therapeutic exercise, but as raw material for a commercial project of historic ambition. A publishing insider quoted in the piece stated this in terms that are difficult to misread. She has not been taking notes casually, she has been taking them methodically. And for anyone who has followed this story from the beginning, that single word methodically is the word that changes everything. Because methodology implies intention, it implies planning. It implies that what is coming was not an impulsive decision made in the aftermath of a difficult experience, but a project conceived and executed with deliberate, sustained purpose over a very long period of time. And crucially, the piece confirms something else that transforms the scope of what we are dealing with. The autobiography is not a solo venture. It is a coordinated, commercially structured project involving some of the most influential names in American media and entertainment: Oprah Winfrey, Shonda Rhimes, Melody Hobson, and Nicole Avant, the wife of Netflix co-CEO Ted Sarandos, who is said to have been actively involved in discussions about how the book could be packaged as a multi-part Netflix special tied to the publication. This is not a woman sitting in her kitchen writing her memoirs. This is a woman preparing a strategic strike of extraordinary sophistication, and the palace is watching every single move.
We have to remember, going back to when Meghan met Oprah before the wedding, that they had talked about an interview, and Meghan told Oprah the time is just not right yet. So that's when we saw the Oprah interview. But I think more was planned at that time, or actually later, when Meghan started talking to Oprah about a potential book. And there is a threat there, because Meghan knows in her pocket she's got a very heavy hand that she can play that is going to no doubt hurt the monarchy.
The publication of this piece was the inciting moment, the thing that ripped the mask off what has been quietly happening in Montecito. Because the contradiction at its heart is so extraordinary, so breathtaking in its audacity, that it is almost difficult to process. Here was a newspaper, one of Britain's most widely read, running a glowing portrait of Meghan Markle's Hollywood network and her thriving circle of powerful allies, just days after its own editor-at-large had published a devastating assessment of her standing in that very world. A world, that editor had reported, where the doors are closing, where the goodwill is evaporating, where even the women she is now being presented as closest to are, according to sources inside those very circles, rather less enthusiastic about Meghan than the piece would have you believe. The left hand and the right hand of the same newspaper were telling diametrically opposite stories, and that contradiction is not accidental. It is the product of competing pressures, competing sources, and a Sussex PR operation that has become extraordinarily adept at placing exactly the stories it wants, at exactly the moments it needs them. And yet there it was, a detailed, clearly briefed account of 4 powerful women, Oprah Winfrey, Shonda Rhimes, Melody Hobson, and Nicole Avant, quietly rallying around Meghan, keeping her afloat, shaping what comes next. The article described a network of influence operating through private messaging groups and off-camera conversations, stretching from Montecito to the upper echelons of Netflix, film production, finance, and philanthropy. It spoke of a woman not merely surviving the narrative around her, but strategically thriving beneath it. A woman whose best chapters are still ahead. A woman whose perceived setbacks are actually quiet preparations for something far more significant. It was, in the estimation of anyone who knows how these things work, a classic piece of strategic pre-publication seeding placed at a precise moment in the news cycle, with a very precise commercial purpose. And that purpose, it turns out, is the autobiography. The article confirmed it, not coyly, not in passing. It named the autobiography as the project around which all of this alignment, all of these powerful women, all of these Netflix conversations, all of this behind-the-scenes maneuvering is quietly centered. A memoir that insiders describe as potentially the biggest global entertainment event of its kind. A memoir that publishing experts quoted in the piece believe could outsell Harry's own book, which shifted more than 1.5 million copies in its very first day of release. And a memoir that, if the voice notes and journals being described are even half as comprehensive as they sound, will contain material that the British royal family will find not merely uncomfortable, not merely embarrassing, but genuinely destabilizing. This is the thing that William has been watching approach like a storm on the horizon. And the storm, it is now clear, is almost upon them.
I think they're just trying to wait for like this big payday, because they're not sincerely wanting to befriend this woman. They see the kind of person she is. It's really disgusting. It's sad. And I can imagine that Melody Hobson, she did want to help Meghan, give her a lot of advice. But, Meghan's not the kind of woman that would even take advice. She wouldn't try to adhere to the business things that Melanie would probably tell her.
Voice notes on her iPhone at 1 a.m, written journals, structured reflections. A publishing insider told the newspaper that she has not been taking notes casually. She has been taking them methodically. Think about what that word means, methodically. This is not the behavior of someone processing a difficult experience in the privacy of their own journal. This is the behavior of someone building a case, compiling evidence, creating a record that is designed, from the very beginning, to be used. And the timing 1 a.m, when the house is quiet and the children are asleep, and there is no one watching, tells you something important about the relationship between this woman's public presentation and her private operation. The warmth, the lifestyle content, the candles and the jam, and the glowing interviews about her happy California life that is the front of house. The voice notes are what is happening backstage. And what makes this genuinely chilling, what separates this from an ordinary celebrity memoir, is the scope of what she will have captured. Because Meghan Markle did not spend a quiet 2 years as a minor working royal, attending ribbon-cutting ceremonies before departing without incident, she was inside the most intimate workings of the British royal family, at one of its most sensitive and consequential periods. She was present at private conversations that touched on succession, on the future of the institution, on the most personal dynamics of a family that happens to sit at the centre of a constitutional monarchy. She observed William and Catherine up close during some of the most significant moments of their public and private lives. She saw King Charles in ways the public never has and never will. She was there for conversations, decisions, and private moments that were never meant to be documented, never meant to be reproduced, never meant to be shared with the world. And she has been recording all of it. Every perceived slight, every moment of tension, every conversation she believes she can reframe in her favour, every exchange she thinks she can use. It is all there, on her iPhone, in her journals, waiting for the moment she decides to deploy it.
This is so, I think, sad for the monarchy, because when Harry does leave, his wife is going to turn on his family. Right? What is he going to do then? Because he is the reason why all this is happening, because he married this woman and she doesn't have any goodwill towards anybody except herself. I mean, look what she's done to her own family.
Prince William has not spoken publicly about Meghan's autobiography. He rarely speaks publicly about anything connected to his brother's life in California, and when he does, it is with the measured restraint of a man who understands that every word he utters on the subject will be analysed, weaponized, and used against him. That is not weakness, that is calculation. William is not a man who reacts to provocation with visible emotion. He is a man who absorbs it, processes it, and responds when the moment is right, and on terms that are entirely his own. And what those closest to him have made clear, through various channels and in various forms over recent months, is that the Prince of Wales has been watching the Sussex situation with growing concern, not merely about the reputational risk to the institution he will one day lead, but about the specific and very credible threat posed by a woman who has been meticulously documenting her years inside the royal family. He understands what is being built. He understands what it could contain. He understands that when it lands, and it will land, the damage will not be limited to headlines that fade after a news cycle. It will be the kind of damage that sticks. The kind that requires a sustained and costly response. The kind that forces the institution into a defensive posture at a moment when William is trying to do anything but be defensive. Those who understand how William thinks will tell you that he is someone who plays a very long game. He does not react impulsively. He does not rise to provocation, but he notices everything, and he forgets nothing. And what he has noticed over the past several years is a pattern of behaviour from Meghan Markle that follows a very consistent logic: the accumulation of leverage, the maintenance of options, the careful, deliberate positioning of herself to maximise her ability to cause damage if and when she chooses to use it. William understands this because it is, in a quieter and considerably more institutional way, also how he operates. And his response to Meghan's autobiography project, characteristically, has been to begin making his own preparations. The titles question is part of that. The slimming of the working monarchy is part of that. The reframing of the institution's public identity around service, continuity, and reliability is part of that. He is not waiting for the bomb. He is building the shelter.
When it comes to a 10 million advance for a book from someone who's already written more than one autobiography, she is going to have to spill the beans. And that's where the fear from the British royal family comes from.
Because here is the thing about Meghan Markle, and this is where the history becomes so critically important to understand. This is not the first time she has used the threat of disclosure as a form of control. The entire Sussex story, from the moment they left royal life and relocated to California, has been underscored by a consistent and recurring pattern. The suggestion, explicit or implicit, that there is always more she could say, always more she could reveal, always a bigger weapon in reserve if the terms of whatever negotiation she is currently engaged in do not go her way. This is not speculation. It is a pattern that has played out, in one form or another, across nearly every significant development in the Sussex story since Megxit. Think about the Oprah interview. That was not a spontaneous decision to tell their story. It was a precisely timed, carefully managed event, released at a moment when it would cause maximum disruption to the royal family and maximum benefit to the Sussex brand. It was preceded by quiet signals to the palace that something was coming, signals that functioned as leverage in ongoing conversations about titles, security, and the terms of the Sussex departure. Think about Harry's memoir. Again, not simply a man processing his grief and his complicated relationship with his family. A strategic deployment of intimate detail designed to shift the balance of the story decisively in their favor, and again, preceded by private warnings, private conversations, private signals that the palace would have understood very clearly. And now, a third act, an autobiography that, according to those familiar with the process, will go further than either of those previous projects, further than the Oprah interview, further even than Spare. And the pattern in Meghan's personal history, stretching back long before she ever met a prince, long before she set foot inside a palace, long before she understood what the British royal family was, or what it represented, tells exactly the same story. She has always found a way to ensure that the people in her life understand, consciously or not, that she holds cards. Her relationship with her father, Thomas Markle, a man who by all accounts adored her and gave everything he had to support her ambitions, broke down in circumstances that remain contested. But what is clear is that Meghan has never shown any meaningful inclination to extend the kind of grace, mercy, or forgiveness that might make an awkward situation simply go away. Her first marriage ended. Old friendships, some of them close and long-standing, ended. Colleagues from her acting career who once spoke warmly of her now rarely speak at all. The trail of damaged relationships behind Meghan Markle is long, and the pattern that runs through all of them is consistent, and it is instructive.
The truth about Meghan is she will always find a way in which she thinks she can win. And the casualties are irrelevant, whether it's her father, her old best friends, her first husband. There always will be casualties in her life. The question is, when will Harry become the casualty?
And so we come to Harry, because in many ways, Harry is the most tragic figure in all of this and the most consequential. He is, by all credible accounts, a man who is desperately unhappy with the life he has built in California. A man who misses his country, his family, his military identity, his purpose, and the sense of grounded belonging that came from being part of an institution that, whatever its imperfections, gave his life structure and meaning. He is a man who misses his brother, even if that relationship has been damaged almost beyond recognition. He is, by all the signs available to those watching closely, a man who wants out. Not necessarily out of the marriage, at least not yet, and at least not publicly, but out of the Montecito experiment. Out of the endless, exhausting cycle of failed ventures, embarrassing headlines, dwindling relevance, and the slow, grinding realization that the life he traded his royal existence for has not delivered what he was promised it would. But here is what Harry does not yet fully understand. Or perhaps, more accurately, here is what Harry understands but cannot yet bring himself to act upon. The moment he takes that step, the moment he makes any meaningful move towards reclaiming his British life, towards rebuilding his relationship with his father and his brother, towards stepping back from the Sussex project in any substantive way, is the exact moment that Meghan's archive becomes most valuable. Because the autobiography is not simply a book about her experiences as a former working royal, it is insurance, it is leverage, it is the thing that keeps everyone at the table on her terms and keeps the terms themselves from being renegotiated in ways that would disadvantage her. As long as Harry stays in California, and as long as the Sussex project continues, the threat remains in reserve. The minute he starts to leave, the minute the marriage shows visible strain, the minute he makes a move back towards the family he abandoned, the threat does not disappear. It gets activated. This is why the royal family finds itself in such a genuinely complex and uncomfortable position. Because the calculus is almost impossibly difficult, and there is no clean answer that satisfies all the competing considerations at play, engage too warmly with the Sussexes, and risk legitimizing a narrative that the palace regards as fundamentally dishonest. Cut them off entirely, and risk triggering an autobiography that might otherwise be delayed indefinitely by the awkwardness of still technically being a duchess and duke. Strip the titles, and send a signal that could be read, in certain American media circles, as confirmation of every grievance Meghan has ever articulated. There is no clean path. There is no sequence of decisions that carries no risk. And Meghan, whatever one thinks of her, and whatever one thinks of the choices she has made, has constructed that situation deliberately and with considerable intelligence.
The royal family would not be coming to Harry's rescue. They would not be funding a divorce to any extent. And they, at this point, wouldn't really care what Meghan tried to say or do, because Meghan has so discredited herself as a liar, a cheat, and a fool.
To the general public, it said, "The narrative of Meghan's isolation and failure is wrong. She is thriving. The people who matter are behind her, and her best chapters are still ahead." To Netflix, it said, "The autobiography is real. The commercial opportunity it represents is enormous. The talent and distribution infrastructure to make it work at scale are already in place, and staying in the Sussex relationship is very much in your financial interest." To the royal family and to William specifically, it said, "The book is coming. The network behind it is formidable. The commercial incentives of every powerful person in that network are aligned with its publication, and any attempt to marginalize us, reduce our profile, or strip our titles will accelerate rather than prevent what is being built." And to Harry, perhaps most pointedly of all, and almost certainly with full awareness of exactly how he would receive it, the piece said, "I have allies. I have leverage. I have been planning this for a very long time. Whatever you are contemplating, think very carefully before you take a single step. Because this piece, as those familiar with how these briefings work will tell you, is as much about the internal dynamics of the Sussex marriage as it is about any external positioning. It sends a signal to everyone in Meghan's orbit to Harry most directly about where the power in this relationship really lies, and it sends it without her having to say a single word directly. That is sophisticated, that is strategic, and that, frankly, is rather chilling. The race framing woven through the piece is also strategic and worth examining honestly and without flinching. Every individual named in the article as part of Meghan's core support network is black. Oprah Winfrey, Shonda Rhimes, Melody Hobson, Nicole Avant, Tyler Perry, Gayle King, Doria Ragland, every single one. This is not an accident, and it is not simply a reflection of Meghan's social circle. It is a deliberate construction designed to ensure that any critique of the autobiography project, any pushback from the royal family, any institutional attempt to protect itself from what is coming, can be framed instantly and loudly as racially motivated. It builds a defensive architecture around the book before the book even exists. And it is one of the primary reasons why the palace finds this situation so genuinely difficult to navigate cleanly.
It was a disastrous management of a ridiculous, trivial thing. And I don't think they know how to handle part 2 of Spare or Meghan's diaries or what was going to happen.
The newspaper piece made a number of claims that royal commentators and insiders have pushed back on with considerable force. And it is worth examining the most significant of those claims carefully and in detail, because buried within the flattering portrait of Meghan's Hollywood network are several specific assertions that simply do not withstand serious scrutiny, and the gap between what the piece claims and what credible sources report tells you everything you need to know about the nature of the exercise. The claim that Nicole Avant, wife of Netflix's Ted Sarandos, remains warmly and actively supportive of Meghan, and that any suggestion of tension between them is, in the words of a source quoted in the piece, simply misread noise rather than reality, is at direct odds with what had been reported just days earlier in the very same newspaper by its own editor-at-large. Reliable sources with genuine proximity to that situation had described Nicole's private feelings about Meghan in terms that were, to put it delicately, considerably less warm than what the later piece would have you believe. Observers who were present at a recent Netflix gathering noted a dynamic between the two women where Meghan was said to have clung to Nicole with a forced and performative closeness that those present described as studied rather than spontaneous. The arms around each other, the hand-holding, the visible display of warmth. This was not the unself-conscious ease of genuine friendship. This was management. This was optics. And the request for those photographs to subsequently be removed from public circulation tells you that even those who agreed to be photographed understood immediately that something about the picture was not quite right. And then there is the claim about the Bezos-Sanchez wedding in Venice, one of the most high-profile social events of the year, at which Meghan and Harry were allegedly invited, but chose not to attend. Not because of any falling out with the hosts. Not because of any awkwardness about the relationship between Lauren Sanchez and a woman who, by credible account, had described her in terms that were far from flattering. But out of a dignified, considered desire to avoid becoming a media circus, royal observers and those familiar with the Sussex social strategy found this particular detail so implausible as to be almost funny. The suggestion that Meghan Markle, a woman who staged paparazzi encounters with the precision of a seasoned press agent, who once stood outside a building in Paris filming near the very tunnel where Princess Diana lost her life, who has accepted virtually every invitation to any event where power, money, and cameras converge, would voluntarily remove herself from a gathering of the world's wealthiest and most influential people, out of modest self-restraint, requires a degree of credulity that the audience for this story has, quite simply, ceased to possess.
Meghan's actually threatened that she's going to take out some sort of terrible thing if it does happen, that she won't allow that to happen. But they have pushed themselves so far, they have behaved so badly.
But let us zoom out for a moment, because the deeper stakes here are not simply about a book deal, or about Meghan's Hollywood rehabilitation, or even about the reputational damage this could inflict on the royal family in the immediate term. The deeper stakes are about children, about legacy, about what kind of inheritance, emotional, reputational, and personal, Archie and Lilibet will receive from the choices their parents are making right now, in real time, with consequences that will echo through their lives for decades. Because think about this honestly. Archie is 6 years old. Lilibet is 3. They are small children who understand very little about the world their parents have constructed around them, and even less about the controversy that surrounds their family name. But they will grow up. Archie will be able to read, and when he can, he will be able to access everything his mother recorded, wrote, and published about his father's family. He will be able to watch the Oprah interview. He will be able to read his father's memoir. He will be able to read his mother's autobiography, the one being assembled right now, on her iPhone, in the early hours of the morning while he sleeps in the next room. And he will do all of this while trying to understand who he is, simultaneously British and American, royal and not royal, Sussex and something that does not yet have a name. The consequences of what Meghan is building are not confined to the next news cycle, or the next streaming quarter, or the next moment in the Sussex PR campaign. They will shape the inner lives of 2 children who had no say in any of this. And what of King Charles? Whatever one thinks of the more complicated chapters of his personal history, Charles is a man who has spent the past several years in genuine and visible pain about his estranged son. He is a grandfather who, according to the most credible accounts available to those who follow this situation closely, has had only occasional and sporadic contact with Archie and Lilibet video calls here and there, messages relayed through intermediaries. The distant warmth of a relationship that both sides want to preserve, but neither can quite reach across the distance to maintain. A man in his late 70s, managing a serious illness with characteristic quiet dignity, watching from thousands of miles away, as the daughter-in-law he once welcomed into his family assembles the most comprehensive and potentially the most damaging account of his private life that anyone has ever attempted to put into print. This is not simply a political calculation or an institutional crisis. This is a human tragedy unfolding in slow motion. And it is one that Meghan's methodical note-taking is making significantly worse with every passing week.
I think Meghan is going to prove to be like Angelina Jolie. There are some women who will do anything to work over a man, and children are fair game. I have little doubt that if there was a divorce, she would bend over backwards to be as nasty as possible. That's just her personality.
So how is the palace handling this? The honest answer is carefully, deliberately, and with a level of strategic patience that does not always receive the credit it deserves from those commentators who want to see more visible, more immediate, more emotionally satisfying action. Because the instinct of many royal watchers, understandably, is to ask why the palace is not doing more. Why is there not a more robust and public response to what is clearly an active and very credible threat? Why are titles not being stripped immediately? Why is there not more visible pressure being brought to bear? Why does the institution seem, to the outside observer, to simply be absorbing blow after blow without responding? The answer lies in the nature of the threat itself, and in a very clear-eyed understanding of what makes Meghan's autobiography project most dangerous and when. The book is most dangerous while it is still unpublished, while it exists only as a threat, as a shadow, as a rumor, as a thing that might happen. It has maximum power. It holds everyone in a state of uncertainty and anxiety. No one knows exactly what it contains. No one knows exactly when it will appear. No one knows precisely which relationships it will rupture, which conversations it will expose, which private moments it will put on public display. That uncertainty is the weapon, not the book itself. And the moment the book is actually published, whatever damage it causes becomes finite, knowable, containable, and answerable. The royal family has dealt with hostile publications many times before. They have outlasted them, absorbed them, and continued. What they cannot as easily absorb is the indefinite, open-ended threat. And so the strategic response is not to give Meghan a reason to accelerate her timeline. It is to refuse to provide the provocation that would make early publication feel more necessary or more advantageous to her. This is why William's positioning is so carefully calibrated, and why it can sometimes look, from the outside, like inaction, when it is in fact a very deliberate form of action. He is not rushing. He is watching. He is building a picture of exactly what is coming, drawing on intelligence from multiple sources, assessing the commercial relationships involved, understanding the publishing timeline, mapping the network around Meghan, and he is making sure that when he does finally act, decisively, and with full institutional weight, it is at a moment of his choosing rather than hers. Those who understand how the future king operates will tell you that he does not regard this as a crisis to be managed reactively. He regards it as a situation to be resolved on his terms and in his own time. And his resolution, when it comes, will not be tentative.
When you think about this, right, William is going to be ruthless in what he sees as necessary changes to the British royal family.
There is a broader warning in all of this that goes well beyond the specifics of one autobiography or one network of Hollywood allies or one carefully briefed newspaper piece. It is a warning about character, about what it truly reveals when a person has been, from the very beginning of a relationship with one of the world's most storied and scrutinized institutions, keeping records, not processing their experiences in the normal human way, through private journals written for themselves, through honest conversations with trusted friends, through the quiet and necessary work of making sense of a difficult and unfamiliar situation, but recording methodically, building a case file, treating the most intimate moments of a marriage, a family, and a life inside an institution as raw material for a future commercial project. That is not how people of good faith behave. That is how people who always intended to leave, and always intended to profit from leaving, prepare for the moment of departure. And here is the question that this raises, the question that those who have followed this story from the very beginning find genuinely haunting, because it has no comfortable answer. Was there ever a version of events in which Meghan Markle's time in the royal family would not eventually become a book? Was there a path along which she could have been warmly welcomed, fully supported, given the space and the time and the flexibility she needed to find her role, and in which she would have quietly flourished, and the autobiography would simply never have been written? Or was the autobiography always the destination? Was it always the plan, from the very moment she understood the access she was gaining and the material she was accumulating, to document everything, preserve everything, and keep the nuclear option permanently available as insurance against any outcome she did not control? The people who know Meghan best, and many of them have now spoken publicly, in one form or another, over the years since Megxit, suggest that the latter is considerably closer to the truth. That the meticulous note-taking was not a response to being mistreated, that it was not the desperate self-protection of a woman who found herself isolated and under attack, and simply wanted to ensure that her version of events existed somewhere. It preceded any mistreatment that she claims to have experienced. It began, the sourcing in this piece makes abundantly clear, before Megxit, before the public falling out, before the Oprah interview that shocked the world, before Spare, while she was still a working member of the royal family, attending engagements, standing beside the Queen, presenting herself to the world as a woman who had found her purpose and her home. She was recording then. She was building then. The performance and the plan were running in parallel from the very beginning. And that, when you sit with it for a moment, is the most genuinely chilling thing about all of this.
Meghan was warmly welcomed in Britain, that everyone in the royal family tried their very, very hardest to make her feel at home and accommodate her, but that unfortunately Meghan only wanted to be the star and made it impossible for her and the royal family to collaborate.
Harry is still King Charles's son. He is still Prince William's brother. He is still the uncle of 3 children who are growing up in Windsor and Kensington and do not yet fully understand why their uncle does not come to family gatherings. Archie is still the king's grandchild. These are biological and emotional facts that no amount of strategic positioning, no amount of legal maneuvering, no amount of published memoir or Netflix documentary or carefully briefed newspaper piece can entirely erase. And what those closest to the royal family observe with a mixture of sadness and frustration is that the door, though damaged and strained and difficult to look at directly, has never been fully closed on Harry. Not by the palace, not by William, not by the king. What has been communicated, through various channels and with varying degrees of explicitness, is that a path back exists for Harry, that it would be welcomed, that the family has not given up on him, even as it has accepted, with increasing clarity, that it has nothing left to offer Meghan. The autobiography changes that calculation in ways that may turn out to be irreversible, because whatever residual goodwill exists within the royal family toward Harry personally, and there is some, buried under layers of frustration and hurt, and the exhausting weight of years of public exposure, it will not survive a book that uses Meghan's methodical, years-long, one-in-the-morning voice note archive to expose, reframe, or weaponize the private lives of people who have, throughout all of this, consistently tried to handle an almost impossible situation with some measure of dignity and discretion. The moment that book is published, the last bridge between Harry Sussex and his British family does not slowly burn. It detonates, and Harry will be standing on it, placed there not by his family, not by the palace, not by William, but by the woman he chose over all of them.
It is going to be a bloodbath, I think, when Harry leaves this woman, because she is going to have all the receipts, the things that she has filmed on her phone, the things she has written, because she was plotting it from the very beginning. So this separation from Harry is going to be a payday for her. And Harry is just trying to get back home to have a normal life.
On one side, an ancient institution, imperfect, sometimes frustrating, occasionally opaque, resistant to change in ways that can be genuinely maddening, that operates on the principle that restraint, service, continuity, and the subordination of self to something larger and older and more important than any individual are the foundation of legitimate authority. It is an institution that asks its members to give up a great deal, to accept scrutiny without complaint, to serve without expectation of personal reward, to place the institution above themselves, always, even when it is costly. It is not a perfect bargain, but it is a bargain that has sustained one of the world's most durable constitutional systems for centuries. On the other side, a woman who has decided that the most valuable thing she possesses is her story, that the telling of it, on her own terms, with maximum commercial impact and minimum accountability, is the ultimate and legitimate expression of her worth. These two ideas are not compatible. They never were. And the tragedy of the Sussex story is not simply that Harry chose one over the other. It is that so many people spent so long hoping that some middle ground might be found. There was no middle ground. There never was. And Meghan, whatever else one might say about her, understood this more clearly and more early than almost anyone else involved. She knew from the beginning, or very close to the beginning, what she was trading her royal life for, and she made her preparations accordingly. The voice notes were being recorded. The journals were being filled. The network was being assembled. The plan was being executed. And now that plan is almost ready. Somewhere in a beautiful house in the hills of Montecito, a woman who once stood beside the Queen of England and told the world she had found her calling is preparing to tell a very different story. One that she has been writing, methodically and in secret, for years. The question facing the royal family, the question facing William, facing Charles, facing Harry himself, is not whether they are ready for what is coming. It is whether anything at all can be done to stop it, or whether, at this late stage, the best they can do is brace.
Prince William plans to flex his muscles and wipe his wayward brother Prince Harry and his power-hungry wife Meghan from the history books.
And that is where we leave you today, with a question that I suspect will stay with you long after this video ends. The way this story has stayed with me since the details of it first broke open. If you had been warmly welcomed into a family, given every opportunity, introduced to the world with genuine care and genuine hope, invited to stand alongside some of the most extraordinary people on earth, and then chose, methodically and from the very beginning, to document everything around you as evidence for a future reckoning, what would that say? Not about the family, but about you. What would it say about the nature of the welcome you were really offering them in return? And perhaps the more personal question, the one that I find genuinely heartbreaking when I allow myself to sit with it, is this. At what point does Harry look at the woman he gave everything up for and understand fully that she has been keeping score of his family from the very first day? Thank you so much for spending this time with us today. These conversations matter, they really do, and the fact that so many of you come back, day after day, to engage with these stories with such intelligence and emotional investment means more than I can adequately express. If you found today's video worthwhile, please do hit the like button. It makes an enormous difference to how many people are able to find this channel and join this conversation. And if you are not yet subscribed, now is the perfect moment. Just hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss what we cover next. And if you know someone who follows the royal family closely, and who you think would find today's story as significant and as troubling as we do, please share it with them. We will see you tomorrow.